Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This week we're going to be modifying an extension rail for my Parkside Plunge Saw. Roll the intro. So the first thing I did was unbox it and just check all of the components that were in it. I had bought this a while ago actually. It's been lying around in the garage. You might have seen it in a few of the videos, but I was just as impressed with the way that it was packed as I was with the actual product. There was no chance of it getting damaged. It wasn't going anywhere. So once I'd unpacked it and I could feel the rail, I was immediately impressed with the quality straight off, and I thought, this is going to actually potentially work out really well. Okay, so straight away, one of the things that I noticed, this is the new track saw rail that I've just got, that I've just seen unpacked. It's made by XL, I think, and this is my current one that came with my Parkside Plunge Saw. Now, these two are supposed to be compatible, in so much as they are meant to run on exactly the same track. The only difference being there is a line or an edge on here that isn't on here. So I'll show you a close-up as I'm doing this, but essentially you've got a ridge here that isn't on this one. So the track saw is supposed to fit on here if you just take off this edge that's here, which is obviously what we need to do. Now, from looking at it, I don't need to take the whole thing off because it's got a gap in the rail in exactly the same way as my one has, the Parkside one. What I think I need to do is level this off completely by cutting back to that steel. It's fine to leave that edge in, but I think it needs to come back and cut all of that metal off. And of course the easiest way to do that is either going to be finding a way to put this through the table saw, and that's going to be quite complicated. I think I might have to build a little jig if I'm going to do that, so that when I run it through the table saw it only takes that off. And of course it hasn't got a huge amount of depth, the blade hasn't got a lot of depth, and with this part here that's jutting out that's level, that's going to be quite tricky. Or I set this up in some way where I can use my current plunge saw and literally just plunge along there, which is what Millard does in his video when he converts a rail. I think he converts a very similar rail to this. It might actually even be this one, but that is the two sort of options. So what I'm going to do now is get the plunge saw out and just offer it up against it and just actually make sure that with that bit being missing, it's going to fit. So let's do that now. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see this, but the track saw does fit. The plunge saw fits perfectly. On this side, I can see the blade is going to take this strip. It'll take probably half that strip off, but it fits absolutely perfectly, with the exception of this ridge here, as I said. So I'll give you a little close-up in a second of the sort of end view of it. But with this ridge removed, I can see it's a really good fit. And actually, there's a little bit of a tolerance. I'm going to say there's probably, with that bit removed, there's probably a 1 mil gap between the edge of here and the edge of here. So even if I didn't go hard up against this line here, which I'm going to try and do, even if I didn't go hard up against there, I think there's a little bit of a tolerance there. So I might be able to get away with not doing the most accurate of cuts, if you see what I mean. The other thing to say about this rail is it is infinitely better quality than the Parkside rail. It's thicker, it's heavier, it's much sturdier, and the rubber that it's got on it, even this rubber in the track that the plunge saw runs down, is really good quality. I'm super impressed with that. It's what I suppose it's what you get what you pay for. I mean, it wasn't really expensive, this either, but in comparison to the Parkside one, it is really nice quality. And actually one of the things I've done on my Parkside one, I'm not sure if this will come out very clearly. Oh, it doesn't if you bash it. I'm not sure how clearly this will come out on the camera, but you might be able to see here, there's like a little ridge. I'll see if you can see that better. I think you can probably just see that ridge, and that ridge is where I tightened the bar in too tightly. Now, when I say tighten it in too tightly, you know, I'm not the Incredible Hulk. I just did a couple of extra turns, and because the metal is so flimsy, it went through and pushed through that bar. But this piece of metal that's on here seems a lot sturdier, so that's a really, really good start. But let me show you what the edge looks like so you can see the sort of groove I need to cut out. Okay, hopefully you can see that all right. I think you can. And if you can see, look, it's just that little taper there, that one piece of metal that's going along here. I should have checked. I'm not actually sure if this rail is compatible with anything else, but that section there is the bit that's got to cut out. So what I basically have got to do is go hard to that side and remove that whole thing. Now in Peter Millard's video, he did a rail that was very similar to this, and I think it might be the one, I will check. But what he did was he clamped the plunge saw above, so he plunged down all the way along that line, which would work perfectly. I think there is a way potentially that I can do this on the table saw, which I think might be actually easier. Now this metal, as you've just heard me say, it's quite thick, but actually that metal there I think is fairly soft, and I've got a feeling that's going to come off pretty quickly if I put it in the table saw with my my blade in the table saw. The original Evolution blade that came in my table saw cuts everything. It cuts plastic, wood, metal, it cuts everything. So I'm going to pop the blade out and see if I can sort this out. The thing that does worry me is obviously that clearance, which to me looks about 2 or 3 mil. So I haven't got a lot of room to play with, and I'm going to have to obviously make sure that this is really tight. And the other thing is, of course, if I do this on the table, so I'm undecided yet, I'm going to have to take the riving knife out, because there's no way the blade is going to go through. And obviously you should never take the riving knife off of your table saw because it is dangerous. So I'm going to have to be super, super careful. But you can at least see there what it is that we need to take out. So it's that strip there, and then hopefully it'll work. Let's try it now. I really wanted to make sure that I protected my new Saxon blade, even though I think it could have cut the metal. As it turned out, the metal was a lot stiffer than I thought it was going to be. But I put in the Evolution blade, and I need to get into the habit of changing my table saw blade for, the job that I'm doing. So I just tilted it, thanks to Loz for that tip about tilting the blade, which I hadn't done. And I put the old Evolution blade back in, and actually I realised how blunt it was. I'm not entirely sure that blade's got much life left in it. A lot of the teeth on it are sort of worn almost flat against the width of the actual blade, whereas my new Saxon one is completely different. So when I'd got it all set up and I got it back to 0, I was ready to start with the cutting. The next thing I did was just measure up. This was just the depth gauge I'd used to see how deep the track was. Turned out it wasn't the correct width, but I just managed to sort of maneuver it by hand. Then I got just an old offcut of plywood just as a test to make sure, and then I took the plunge and ran the rail through for the first time. I have to say I was really nervous and I didn't want to ruin it, obviously. Okay, so I've had the first pass and mixed results. I'm going to be honest. The cut is pretty straight all the way down, but it isn't deep enough, so I've still got material at the end that's left. It does get a bit rugged. I don't know if it's the fact that the fence moved or I moved, but it does get a bit rugged. And at the very beginning, there's a tiny bit, like 1/2 mil of metal at the beginning, but at the end, it's the proper full-size wedge. It hasn't actually cut any of it out at all. So what is apparent is the blade, the depth of the blade was too shallow. So I've just notched it up 1 mil. It obviously has worked because I'm covered in bits of aluminium all over the table saw and all across the floor. So it has worked to a degree, but it needs another pass, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so this is the last run I've just put through the table saw. I'm hoping you can see this. I think I'm going to take this as success. I'm just being very careful because obviously I've now got pieces of metal splintered everywhere, but I have taken, it has taken the ridge out most of the way along, and to be fair, it is quite a clean cut. What it hasn't done is taken the ridge off. I'm not sure if you can see that, but you can see there's still just under 1 mil of the ridge left on this side, and I think that's partly due to the way that I'm feeding it through, because the very end bit is really difficult to feed through, whereas the other bit isn't. So I think this is actually progress, he says. It has left quite a rough edge, so what I'm going to have to do is get a file on that afterwards, but I think it's much better than the first couple of turns. And actually, when I run my finger along that, which I'm very carefully doing with gloves on, it's actually pretty good. It's actually pretty square to the edge all the way along, and again I think you can probably see that at the top. So just a slight problem at the two ends by the look of it. It's not quite off here. There's a little bit there, and actually there's a little kink there, so I must have caught that rail somewhere, but I don't think that's going to matter because that's only the actual rail that you use the clamps for. So I'm going to get a pair of pliers and just snip this off, and we'll see how much of the rail needs a bit more adjustment. So let's do that now. Just to say, again, I was really careful here because these little shards of metal were incredibly sharp. One of them went straight through the edge of my glove, so I was very, very cautious of what I was doing. So, hoping you can see this, I've had the fourth pass. It's rough, I'm not going to lie, it is rough, but it is all removed. There's a couple of slight cutouts. But hopefully you can see this as I'm running the camera along with a bit of luck. The piece of metal that I wanted off has gone. Now, one of the things I think I underestimated was actually the strength of that metal. I thought my table saw would just go straight through it, but it didn't. It was actually very stubborn, so it has left an edge. And I've got a file. I'm just going to file that off now. But to be fair, with the exception of a couple of bits where it's just cut in slightly, it has actually done exactly what I wanted it to do, which is take that bit out. So before I file it off, I'm just going to now lay it flat and offer up the saw. But one very, very important thing about this, there's no overhanging pieces or uncut pieces of material. So what I'm going to try and do now is get a shot of the end, just adjust the camera. So the one good thing is it has completely taken off the edge. It's cut into this edge a little bit, which is obviously where the clamps go, but to be honest with you, I'm not worried about that in the slightest, because when it's on in the track saw, the rail saw, the plunge saw, sorry, is running up and down it, that won't matter, because obviously the plunge saw pushes against this, which gives it the correct or the straight line. This bit actually isn't needed. So there's absolutely no there's no edge left. I'm just going to put my glove on because it is quite sharp. So there's no edge left all the way along. Yes, it is a little bit rough, I'm not going to deny, in places, but actually it's smooth. So what I'm going to do now is just put the plunge saw on and just see if it slides up and down and whether removing that has done what we wanted to do. So let's do that now. Okay, so here we go. Fingers crossed. I'm genuinely nervous. I haven't put the plunge saw on it yet. So this could either be a huge success and I'm really happy, or it could be the end of this rail. So let's get the plunge saw. Fingers crossed. Okay, so I am very, very pleased to say it works. Whoop, whoop. And actually, looking as I'm running the saw down and pressing it hard against that line, the line that's from the piece of metal I cut, the edge actually isn't too bad. I've got a solid equal distance all the way along now. Oh, I was going to say it stopped there, but that's because the saw's against that. I've got about a mil. There's just one place there. I've got about 2 mils in one bit there, but the rest of the gap is really, really consistent. So actually, perhaps that cut wasn't as rugged as I thought it was. The saw fits. There is a slight variance in the middle, but as I said, because the saw's going to be pushing against this bit, that's not even going to be an issue. But I do need to tidy this up now. I've got a rasp. I'm just going to sort of run it along a little bit because I don't want to take too much more of this rail off, but obviously I don't want to leave this rough edge, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so this is the end of the project, and as you can see, the rail is now finished. I just got the file and I took that edge off, and I'm now running my finger up and down it, and it's absolutely as smooth as anything. So I've just tried, as you've seen on the video, I've just tried the plunge saw on it, and it works perfectly. I'm not going to cut the rubber just yet. I want to wait until the first time that I use it, but overall I'm pleased with how it's turned out, because if you remember back at the beginning of the video, the objective of this was to have an extended rail. In order to do that, I had to remove that piece of metal, so I actually have achieved what I set out to do. Little bit more complicated on the way I did it, and having rewatched Peter Millard's, which I'm convinced is exactly the same one, having watched his and seen how he did it, I'm convinced that the way I did it is probably the best way for me. Now, having said that, if I was to do this again, or if I buy another one of these rails so that I've got double the capacity, there's two very important things I would do. Number one, I would adjust the table saw a bit more accurately first time. It actually took 4 passes on the table saw to remove that metal, and actually I should have done it deeper, even if I risked taking a little bit of a gouge out of the metal underneath, because having 4 attempts did 2 things. It made it slightly uneven in places, obviously applying the pressure of this through, because when it was cutting it took a bit of welly to get the guide rail through. So having a bit more pressure meant there was more opportunity for it to slightly walk off track, which is what it did. That's the first thing. And the second thing about doing it 4 times is the garage floor is now covered in thousands and thousands of little pieces of metal. I've swept up twice and I've hoovered twice, and I've got a lot of them up, but just looking on the floor I can see them glinting. So that will be another long cleanup after this. So that is also something you have to be careful of. And of course, you must make sure you wear PPE, and you probably couldn't see it on the video, but when I was cutting that, I was getting the odd bit of metal shooting up and hitting the glasses or hitting me on the face. Tiny little bits. It probably wouldn't even hurt you even if it got in your eye, but just things to be very, very careful of. Now, this rail was bought for a very specific reason. I was sick to death of having to constantly put my 2 sort of half rails that came with a Parkside Plunge Saw together, but I've now got 1 rail. So if I wanted to cut something that is longer than half, obviously I could just use this rail straight away. But of course the other advantage is I've now got 2 rails. I've got this one and one that is pretty much exactly the same size. So if I want to do a longer cut, if you've just seen my recent video on the dishwasher and saw the kickboard, if I wanted to do a much, much longer cut than that, I now have the opportunity to do it, because I can attach this rail to the Parkside rail that I got with the actual saw. So that's going to give me, I think this is 1.5 meters, I think it is, or 1.6 meters. That's going to give me enough length that I could do that, and it's also going to give me enough length that I could cut an entire 2.44 meter sheet of dry good plywood MDF. So very pleased with how it turned out. All right, it might not be as clean and as clinical as Peter Millard's, by the way. I'm happy with how it's turned out. It's usable, the edge is very, very flat, it's very straight, and when I run the plunge saw up and down, it fits in that track perfectly. And this is also a much, much better quality rail than the Parkside one. Nothing wrong with the Parkside one, but this is a much better rail. So overall, really happy with this project. I just want to say, if this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, please don't forget to subscribe and like and comment. I don't understand how it works. I'm sure many of you do, but the more likes I get on the videos, the more YouTube will suggest the right content to you and the more it helps the channel. So if it is your first time, please subscribe. There's a weekly video, a range of things, tool reviews, builds and modifications like this, and maintenance jobs. There's loads of things to keep you up to date on. Also, there's a lot of videos in my back catalogue now. I'm pretty sure I've got about 75 videos or something like that. So if you are new, please feel free to subscribe and look back at everything else. If you are one of my regular subscribers that watches every week, number one, thank you for support. And number two, I just want to give a shout out to everybody who has been commenting regularly. I've got the same 5, 6, 7 people that comment on each of my videos. The feedback is really, really important to me. It's good feedback and it's everything I take on board. I respond to all of them, but it is really, really important to me. So please keep up the feedback. I hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers, and I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care.